Imagine being stranded in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, surrounded by nothing but endless waves, an unforgiving sun, and an overwhelming silence broken only by the cries of seagulls. For Salvador Alvarenga, this wasn't just a horrifying thought, it was his reality. The year was 2012, and what began as a routine fishing trip off the coast of Mexico turned into a battle against nature, solitude, and the very limits of human endurance. Salvador Alvarenga was a fisherman, hardened by years of navigating deep-sea waters. At 35, he was no stranger to the unpredictable dangers of the ocean. He, along with a 22-year-old novice named Ezequiel Cordoba, set out on a 2-day fishing expedition in a small fiberglass boat. Their destination was 50 miles offshore, a zone teeming with sharks. They were part of Los Tiburoneros, a group of fearless shark fishermen. Despite knowing a storm was approaching, Alvarenga felt confident. He had weathered storms before, but this time was different. Within hours of their departure, the storm arrived with a vengeance. For 7 days, the unrelenting winds and waves tossed their 25-foot fishing boat like a toy. Alvarenga's engine failed, leaving them at the mercy of the ocean. As if that wasn't enough, they lost their radio and fishing gear, rendering them helpless against the brutal forces of nature. Cordoba was thrown overboard during the storm, but was miraculously saved when Alvarenga grabbed him by the hair and pulled him back into the boat. By the time the storm passed, they had drifted far from the Mexican coastline. Their tiny vessel was nothing more than a speck in the vastness of the Pacific. Airplanes occasionally appeared overhead, but without a mast, flares, or any means of signaling, their cries for help went unanswered. In those initial days, thirst became their fiercest adversary. They were forced to drink their own urine just to survive. It wasn't until weeks later that rain provided their first taste of fresh water. Hunger soon followed, gnawing at their will to live. Alvarenga relied on skills he had learned as a child in El Salvador. With no fishing gear, he resorted to catching fish with his bare hands, snatching them out of the water with the precision of a predator. Seabirds, which began to land on the boat for rest, became another unexpected food source. Alvarenga grabbed the birds, cutting their throats and drinking their blood to stave off dehydration. He and Cordoba ate whatever they could: raw fish, small sharks, seaweed, and even parts of the birds they caught. The ocean, however, was not generous. Days would pass without food, leaving them weak and desperate. Cordoba, younger and less experienced, began to lose hope. He spoke often of his mother and of food, tortillas and cold drinks that seemed like a distant dream. Alvarenga tried to console him, offering words of encouragement and hugs, but Cordoba's despair deepened. After 2 months at sea, Cordoba succumbed to his suffering. On the day he died, it was raining. Huddled together in their icebox shelter, the two men prayed. Cordoba asked Alvarenga to visit his mother and deliver his final message. His death was peaceful, but for Alvarenga, the aftermath was anything but. For 6 days, Alvarenga kept Cordoba's corpse in the boat, speaking to it in his solitude. But the realization of his deteriorating mental state forced him to act. "I had to let him go," Alvarenga later recalled. He slipped Cordoba's body into the ocean and watched as it sank beneath the waves. Alone and devastated, Alvarenga contemplated ending his own life. The thought of condemning his soul to hell, however, stopped him. Instead, he turned to prayer and an unshakable belief that God would save him. Day after day, week after week, the ocean stretched endlessly before him. Alvarenga saw cargo ships in the distance and frantically waved for help, but none stopped. At times, he questioned whether the ships were real or hallucinations brought on by isolation and dehydration. To maintain his sanity, he created routines. He sang hymns, talked to himself, and focused on the simple goal of finding food. The ocean became both his prison and his provider. Everything he ate was raw. Every sip of water was a gift from the skies, and every day survived was a victory against insurmountable odds. After 438 days, more than 14 months of drifting, Alvarenga spotted land. It was the Marshall Islands, a remote chain of atolls in the Pacific. Overcome with relief, he jumped into the water and swam toward the shore. When he hit the sand, he fainted, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of his survival. Residents found him on the beach, his body emaciated, his hair and beard wildly overgrown. Though they couldn't communicate verbally, the locals provided him with water and called for help. Alvarenga was taken to a hospital, where he began his slow recovery. Alvarenga's return to civilization was met with skepticism. His story seemed too incredible to be true, but oceanographers and scientists confirmed the plausibility of his journey. Weather patterns and ocean currents aligned with his account, proving that his 6,000-mile drift across the Pacific was entirely possible. Despite the doubts, Alvarenga remained focused on fulfilling his promise to Cordoba. He visited Cordoba's mother, delivering her son's final words. Today, Salvador Alvarenga lives a quiet life in El Salvador. He has reconciled with his estranged daughter and continues to pray daily. But the ocean that once defined his livelihood now haunts his dreams. He has not returned to fishing and avoids the sea whenever possible. "I'm afraid," he admits. "The ocean keeps haunting me." Despite his fears, Alvarenga's story is one of resilience and faith. It is a testament to the human spirit's ability to endure even the most unimaginable circumstances. His survival is not just a story of drifting on the ocean, it is a story of hope, determination, and the will to live. Salvador Alvarenga's 438 days at sea serve as a reminder of the strength within us all to overcome the impossible and find light in the darkest of times. To survive the vastness of the Pacific Ocean for over a year with no resources is nothing short of a miracle. Alvarenga's journey wasn't just about battling the physical challenges of thirst, hunger, and exposure, but also a fight to maintain his sanity. The isolation was suffocating, the silence deafening, and the vastness of the ocean a constant reminder of how alone he truly was. Yet despite it all, he kept going. He prayed when there was no hope. He hunted when there was no food. And when he finally reached the shore, he proved that the human spirit is capable of enduring the unimaginable. The story of Salvador Alvarenga will forever be etched as one of the most remarkable tales of survival in history.